A single operative moves through the classified combat footage like a ghost, neutralizing an entire terrorist compound with impossible speed and precision. The hardened military leaders watch in stunned silence as Second Lieutenant Sarah Chen, the woman they'd tried desperately to force out of the elite combat unit program, accomplishes what an entire tactical team couldn't. The harsh fluorescent lights of the Pentagon's secure briefing room cast sharp shadows across the faces of the Joint Special Operations Command leadership. General James Harrison's weathered features reflect decades of combat experience as he stands before a series of screens displaying alarming statistics about recent special operations missions. Behind him, the central screen shows a global map dotted with red markers, each representing a failed operation or operator casualty. Gentlemen, what you're looking at represents 18 months of increasing mission failures. Harrison begins, his voice carrying the weight of lost soldiers. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. We've lost more operators than in the previous 5 years combined. Our traditional methods aren't just falling short, they're getting our best people killed. Colonel Marcus Stone, director of the Special Operations Training Division, shifts uncomfortably in his chair. His perfectly pressed uniform and rigid posture speak to 25 years of unwavering dedication to military tradition. With all due respect, sir, our training programs are the most rigorous in the world. The problem isn't our methods, it's finding candidates who can meet our standards. His fingers drum against the classified folder in front of him, containing the latest washout statistics from the Elite Combat Unit Qualification course. And that's precisely where we've been wrong, a new voice interjects. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, head of the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency's Human Performance Division, steps into the light. Her civilian attire stands out among the sea of military uniforms, but her presence commands equal attention. She approaches the central display, her heels clicking against the polished floor with purposeful rhythm. For decades, we've been selecting operators based on a narrow set of physical parameters, she continues, pulling up a new set of data. Upper body strength, endurance, speed. But our enemies have evolved. They're using technology, unconventional tactics, and neural enhancement drugs. Meanwhile, we're still looking for the same soldier we sought in the 1980s. The room fills with murmurs of disagreement. Major General Phillips, a stalwart defender of traditional special operations, speaks up. Dr. Rodriguez, are you suggesting we abandon standards that have produced the finest warriors in history? No, General. I'm suggesting we expand our definition of elite capability. She brings up a classified file marked Project Hyperion on the main screen. The room falls silent as brain scan images appear, showing neural activity patterns unlike anything they've seen before. Over the past 3 years, we've identified 23 individuals with extraordinary neural efficiency. Their brains process information and react at speeds far beyond normal human capability. They don't just think faster, they integrate and respond to complex situations at rates that seem impossible. Colonel Stone scoffs audibly. And I suppose you found one of these superhumans ready to join special operations? Dr. Rodriguez's smile carries a hint of satisfaction. Actually, Colonel, we have. Second Lieutenant Sarah Chen, currently serving as a logistics officer at Fort Braxton. She pulls up Chen's file, displaying a series of test results that cause even the skeptical officers to lean forward. Impossible, Stone mutters, studying the numbers. These reaction times can't be real. They're not just real, Colonel. They're consistent. Lieutenant Chen's neural processing speed exceeds our top 50 operators combined. While they're still analyzing a threat, she's already formulated and begun executing a response. General Harrison studies the file carefully, his expression unreadable. What exactly are you proposing, Doctor? A test case, sir. Let Lieutenant Chen attempt the Elite Combat Unit Qualification course, the same one Colonel Stone oversees. If she passes, we implement Project Hyperion's selection criteria across all special operations programs. If she fails. She pauses, meeting Stone's antagonistic gaze. Then we maintain the status quo. Stone rises from his chair, his voice tight with barely contained anger. General, this is absurd. The ECU qualification course breaks the strongest men we have. 80% wash out before week 3. Most don't even make it through Hell Week. Putting some logistics officer through this, much less a female one, would be a waste of valuable training resources. Or, General Harrison interrupts, it could be exactly what we need to evolve. He turns to face the room. Gentlemen, we're losing our edge. Our enemies are adapting while we cling to tradition. Maybe it's time we did something unprecedented. The general's next words fall like hammer blows in the silent room. Make it happen, Colonel. Lieutenant Chen gets her shot at ECU qualification. And Stone? She gets treated exactly like any other candidate. No special treatment, good or bad. As the meeting adjourns, Colonel Stone remains behind, staring at Chen's file photo on the screen. Dr. Rodriguez approaches him, gathering her materials. A word of advice, Colonel? Don't underestimate her. The future of warfare isn't about who can do the most push-ups. Stone's jaw tightens. The future of warfare, Doctor, is still about surviving hell, and I guarantee you Lieutenant Chen is about to experience plenty of that. Dr. Rodriguez pauses at the door, a knowing smile playing at her lips. That's what the last person who underestimated her said too, right before she proved them wrong. The pre-dawn stillness at Fort Braxton's Combat Operations Center is shattered by the sudden blare of alarms. Red warning lights pulse across the windowless facility as dozens of screens flicker to life, displaying real-time satellite feeds of an operation going critically wrong. Second Lieutenant Sarah Chen sits at her station, dark eyes moving with uncanny speed across 6 different monitors while her hands dance between multiple keyboards. To the casual observer, she might appear to be just another logistics officer managing supply chains, one of many young officers pulled into the night shift. They couldn't be more wrong. Sir, Team Echo has missed their 3rd consecutive check-in, announces Captain Reynolds, his voice carrying the practiced calm of someone delivering bad news. Last known position shows them heading into Grid Sector 7. Satellite coverage is intermittent due to the storm system moving through the area. Colonel Watson, the operation commander, leans forward in his chair, steel gray eyes fixed on the tactical display. His weathered face, carved by decades of similar nights, betrays a flicker of concern. That's deep in hostile territory. If they've been compromised, extraction becomes exponentially more complicated. Start running contingency scenarios. Permission to speak, sir? Chen's voice cuts through the tension, her fingers never pausing their relentless dance across the keyboards. Several senior officers turn, some with barely concealed disdain at the junior officer's breach of protocol. At 26, Chen is not only the youngest officer in the room, but also the only woman in a sea of battle-hardened men. Lieutenant Chen, Watson sighs, rubbing his temples. Unless this pertains to supply logistics, which is your actual job. Echo Team isn't heading to their designated extraction point, she continues, her voice carrying quiet certainty. On her primary screen, her fingers fly across the interface, pulling up a complex tactical overlay. Multiple data points materialize, showing the team's movement pattern over the last hour. A series of seemingly random position markers that draw confused looks from the other officers. They're being hunted, she explains, her voice remaining steady and analytical despite the gravity of her words. These deviations aren't random. Look at their speed variations, their choice of terrain features. Her hands move with impossible precision, annotating key points faster than most people could even process them. They're responding to enemy movement patterns we can't see directly. Based on their training protocols, environmental analysis, and historical mission data, they'll be heading to secondary extraction point Delta 7. Her finger moves to a spot nearly 15 kilometers from their expected location, deep in territory marked as high risk. Captain Reynolds scoffs, not bothering to hide his dismissal. With all due respect, Lieutenant, that's not just unlikely, it's impossible. The extraction plan clearly states, "Contact!" The radio crackles to life, cutting through the tension with the unmistakable sounds of combat in the background. Echo Team requesting immediate extraction. We are under heavy fire, multiple hostiles, approaching grid coordinates. The coordinates scroll across the main screen, matching Chen's prediction down to the last decimal. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The room falls silent, all eyes moving between the tactical display and the young lieutenant who somehow saw it coming. Colonel Watson stares at Chen, then back at the screens, his expression a mix of disbelief and dawning realization. "How in God's name did you—" "Pattern recognition and behavioral analysis, sir," she responds, her hands already flying across multiple keyboards adjusting supply logistics to support the new extraction point. Her eyes scan 6 different data streams simultaneously, processing information at a speed that makes several officers exchange uncomfortable glances. Echo Team's commander is Captain Marcus Rivera. I analyzed his past 15 mission logs and identified recurring tactical preferences. When under pursuit, he consistently prioritizes terrain-based concealment over direct routes to safety. The satellite imagery from the last hour showed 3 pursuing vehicles here, here, and here. Her fingers tap each location with machine-like precision. Given the terrain features, weather conditions, and his documented response patterns, this extraction point had an 87% probability of selection. The room falls into stunned silence as Chen continues working, her movements almost a blur. Supply routes recalculate in real time, fuel requirements adjust automatically, and support teams receive updated coordinates, all while she simultaneously monitors 12 different tactical feeds. The speed of her cognitive processing becomes impossible to ignore as she manipulates multiple systems with what appears to be superhuman coordination. "Sir," she adds, eyes still scanning the feeds. "Based on current enemy movement patterns and terrain analysis, they'll need air support within the next 6 minutes and 30 seconds. I've already tasked the QRF helicopters, updated their threat briefing, and calculated optimal approach vectors accounting for the incoming storm system." Watson opens his mouth to protest, but before he can speak, Echo Team's voice crackles through the comm system again, taking heavy fire, requesting immediate air support. The Quick Reaction Force helicopters, already en route thanks to Chen's foresight, arrive exactly when needed. Within minutes, Echo Team is safely extracted. After the operation, Colonel Watson pulls Chen aside. "That was impressive, Lieutenant, but also completely outside your jurisdiction. You're a logistics officer, not a tactical analyst." "Sir, with respect, logistics is about predicting needs before they arise," Chen responds, her posture perfect but her eyes intense. "Whether that's ammunition, fuel, or tactical support shouldn't matter. I saw a pattern, analyzed the variables, and calculated the most probable outcome. At 3 times the speed of our best analysts," a new voice adds. Dr. Rodriguez steps into the room, causing both officers to snap to attention. "At ease. Lieutenant Chen, I believe we need to have a discussion about your future in the military." Watson's eyes narrow. "Doctor, this is a secure facility. You don't have clearance to—" "Actually, Colonel, I do." She hands him a document bearing the Joint Chief's seal. "Lieutenant Chen, you've been selected for a special program, one that might better utilize your unique capabilities." Chen studies Dr. Rodriguez carefully, her mind already racing through possibilities. "What kind of program?" "One that will either change the future of special operations," Rodriguez answers, "or prove a lot of powerful people wrong. The question is, are you ready to prove what you're really capable of?" Chen's response is immediate, her voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone who's spent a lifetime being underestimated. "When do we start?" The evening sun casts long shadows through the blinds of Lieutenant Chen's modest apartment on Fort Braxton's officers' housing complex. The room is meticulously organized, a habit drilled into her by years of military service and her own analytical nature. As she methodically packs her gear for tomorrow's meeting, her movements are precise, each item carefully considered and placed with purpose. Her hands pause over a framed photo on her desk, a younger version of herself standing proudly with her parents at her officer candidate school graduation. Her father, a physics professor who'd emigrated from Taiwan 30 years ago, beams with unmistakable pride. Next to him, her mother, a software engineer, displays the same quiet confidence that Chen herself has become known for. Beside the photo sits a worn copy of Sun Tzu's The Art of War, annotated in both English and Mandarin, a gift from her grandfather, a former Taiwan Special Forces operator, who'd taught her that true strength often comes in unexpected forms. The sudden buzz of her phone breaks her contemplation. A message from her fiancé, Captain David Mitchell. "Just heard about ECU, coming over. We need to talk." Chen's jaw tightens. Word travels fast on a military base, but she hadn't expected it to reach the infantry school this quickly. She continues packing while she waits, adding her laptop, specialized training gear, and the small collection of tactical analysis books she's accumulated over the years. 20 minutes later, David's heavy footsteps echo down the hallway. He enters without knocking, a privilege of their 3-year relationship, still wearing his service uniform from a long day of training recruits. The 4 bronze stars on his chest catch the fading sunlight, reminders of combat deployments that have shaped his view of military service. "Tell me it's just a rumor," he says without preamble, his normally composed demeanor cracking. "Tell me you're not actually considering this insanity." "I'm not considering it," Chen replies, continuing to pack methodically. "I've already accepted." "God damn it, Sarah." David's fist connects with the doorframe, the sudden outburst so unlike his usual controlled manner that Chen finally stops what she's doing. "Do you have any idea what you're getting into? The Elite Combat Unit isn't just another training program. It's designed to break people, strong people, experienced operators who've seen real combat." "Dr. Rodriguez showed me the program details," Chen responds, her voice deliberately calm. "It's different from what you might expect." "Different how?" David's laugh is bitter as he paces the room. "Because they're calling it an experimental selection course instead of admitting they're setting you up to fail. I've seen what ECU training does to people, Sarah. These aren't just physical challenges, they're psychological warfare. They strip away everything you think you know about yourself until there's nothing left." Chen finally turns to face him fully. "You don't think I can handle it?" "That's not..." David runs a hand through his close-cropped hair in frustration, his wedding band catching the light. A promise of a future that suddenly seems less certain. "Look, what you did in the Ops Center today, that was incredible. The way you process information, how you see patterns others miss, I've never seen anything like it. But this isn't about analyzing data or making split-second decisions from behind a desk. This is about..." "About what?" Chen's voice carries an edge now, sharp as a combat knife. "About being a woman? About not fitting their ideal physical profile? About disturbing the comfortable assumptions everyone's made about what makes an effective operator? About staying alive." David's voice rises before he catches himself. Years of command presence warring with personal fear. "I've lost friends to ECU training, Sarah. Good soldiers, tough as nails, who push themselves too far. Martinez in 2022, stroke during Hell Week. Peterson last year, training accident that everyone knows wasn't really an accident. And that was during regular selection. The program they're putting you through, they're going to make it 10 times harder just to prove their point." Chen moves to her window, looking out at the base's lights beginning to flicker on in the gathering dusk. The distant sound of artillery practice provides a fitting backdrop to their confrontation. "You're right," she says quietly, her reflection ghostly in the glass. "They are trying to prove a point, that someone like me doesn't belong, that all their preconceptions about what makes an elite operator are correct." She turns back to him, her expression resolute. "But they're wrong, and I'm going to prove it." "At what cost?" David steps closer, his voice softening as he reaches for her hand. "We're supposed to get married in 6 months, Sarah. If you make it through selection, and that's a massive if, you'll be deployed with ECU teams for years. Different continent every few months, classified missions, no contact for weeks at a time. Everything we've planned, everything we've talked about." "I thought you of all people would understand," Chen says, gently pulling her hand away. "You're the one who always pushed me to aim higher, to not let others define my limits." When everyone else saw a quiet Asian girl who should stick to computers and analysis, you saw something more. That was before. He stops himself, but not soon enough. Before what? Chen's eyes narrow, the last light of day making them seem almost luminescent. Before it meant I might surpass you? Before it threatened your idea of what I should be? Or before you realized I might actually succeed where others failed? The silence between them stretches, heavy with unspoken words and shifting paradigms. Finally, David reaches for his cover on the coffee table. I can't talk you out of this, can I? Number Chen's voice is gentle but firm. This isn't just about me anymore. Dr. Rodriguez showed me the statistics. How many potential operators we've lost because they didn't fit the traditional model. How many missions failed because we kept looking for the same type of soldier while our enemies evolved. If I can prove this works, if I can show there's another way, then you'll change the future of special operations, David finishes, echoing Dr. Rodriguez's words. He moves to the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. Just promise me one thing? What? Don't let them break you. Not the training, not the instructors, not even me. Whatever happens, stay true to who you are. As the door closes behind him, Chen returns to her packing, adding her grandfather's book to the bag. On her phone, a new message from Dr. Rodriguez glows in the growing darkness. 0500 tomorrow. Bring everything you'll need for 3 months. And Lieutenant, get ready for the hardest fight of your life. Chen looks one last time at the photo on her desk, at her younger self's confident smile, and whispers in Mandarin a phrase her grandfather taught her. The strongest steel is forged in the hottest fire. The military transport helicopter touches down at 0600 sharp at Fort Raiders Special Operations Training Complex, its rotors kicking up clouds of dust in the pre-dawn gloom. Lieutenant Chen steps out into the biting cold of an October morning, her regulation duffel bag slung over one shoulder. She's alone, the only candidate arriving on this flight. The others, she knows, arrived yesterday, already bonding and forming the connections she'll have to work twice as hard to build. The concrete training yard stretches out before her, surrounded by austere buildings bearing only numbers instead of names. In the distance, an obstacle course rises like an industrial nightmare against the purple horizon. A lone figure stands waiting, Colonel Marcus Stone, his ramrod-straight posture visible even in the half-light. Lieutenant Chen, he calls out as she approaches, his voice carrying the practiced neutrality of someone who's already decided her fate. You're 3 minutes early, good. Follow me. They walk in silence through the complex, passing groups of male trainees already engaged in their morning PT. Conversations die as Chen passes, replaced by not-so-subtle whispers and openly hostile stares. She catalogs each reaction, each face, her mind automatically building a database of potential allies and adversaries. Stone leads her to a small office where Dr. Rodriguez waits alongside a mountain of a man, whose chest bears the distinctive trident of a Navy SEAL. Lieutenant, Rodriguez greets her with a nod. Meet Chief Master Sergeant Marcus Kane. He'll be your primary instructor during selection. Kane studies Chen with eyes that have seen too much combat to waste time on prejudice. His voice is surprisingly soft when he speaks. Dr. Rodriguez has briefed me on your unique capabilities. I've also reviewed your performance during yesterday's Echo Team extraction. Impressive pattern recognition. But this isn't the ops center, Lieutenant. Here, patterns get people killed. That's why I'm here to learn new ones, Chief, Chen responds, meeting his gaze. A ghost of a smile crosses Kane's weathered face. We'll see. He turns to a whiteboard covered in what appears to be a training schedule. Standard ECU selection is brutal enough, 80% washout rate. But you're part of something different. Project Hyperion demands more extensive testing of your cognitive capabilities under extreme physical and psychological stress. He begins outlining a training regimen that makes Chen's analytical mind spin. Enhanced night operations, advanced tactical problem-solving under duress, combat simulation scenarios that would challenge even veteran operators, all while maintaining the punishing physical standards of regular ECU selection. "One more thing," Stone interjects, his voice carrying an edge. "You'll be training alongside our regular ECU candidates. Same standards, same accommodations. No special treatment." "Wouldn't want any, sir," Chen replies. "Good." Stone's smile doesn't reach his eyes. "Because you won't get any, especially not from your fellow candidates. Speaking of which." He checks his watch. They should be finishing their morning run. Time for introductions. They exit the building to find 30 men assembled in the yard, still breathing hard from their run. Their eyes lock onto Chen immediately, a mix of confusion, derision, and outright hostility evident on their sweat-streaked faces. "Gentlemen," Stone addresses the group, "meet Lieutenant Chen. She'll be joining your selection class as part of a special warfare capability assessment program. I expect you to treat her with the same professional courtesy you'd show any other candidate." A low murmur ripples through the group. One candidate, a heavily muscled Marine with sergeant's stripes, speaks up. "Sir, with respect, this isn't some social experiment. We're here to become elite operators." "Your concern is noted, Sergeant Miller," Stone replies, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. "But Lieutenant Chen's presence here comes with full Joint Chief's authorization. If you have an issue with that, there's the gate." He points to the distant entrance. No one moves. "Excellent." Kane steps forward. "Now that the pleasantries are done, let's see what our new arrival can do. Lieutenant Chen, you have 2 minutes to change into PT gear. When you return, you and your fellow candidates will demonstrate your readiness with a simple exercise." As Chen jogs toward the female quarters, a converted storage room at the far end of the complex, she hears Kane's voice ring out behind her. "The rest of you, prepare for a modified combat readiness assessment. Winner leads tomorrow's tactical planning session. Loser." His pause carries weight. Gets to explain to me why they lost to someone they think doesn't belong here. Chen changes quickly, her mind already analyzing possible scenarios, calculating odds, identifying variables. As she emerges back into the morning light, she sees the training yard has been transformed. 31 sets of combat gear lie scattered across the concrete, each a jumbled mess of weapons, equipment, and tactical gear. Kane stands in the center, that ghost of a smile still playing at his lips. Simple exercise, candidates. Each pile contains standard ECU field loadout. Your task is to properly assemble and don all gear, weapons, and equipment in the correct order according to SOF protocols. First one properly equipped and standing at attention wins. His eyes meet Chen's. Begin. The yard erupts in a frenzy of activity as 31 candidates attack their gear piles. But while others rush to grab their equipment, Chen remains still for 3 precious seconds, her eyes moving with inhuman speed as she analyzes her pile's layout, identifying optimal assembly patterns and sequence efficiencies that others might miss in their haste. In the chaos of 31 candidates scrambling to assemble their gear, Chen's methodical approach stands out like a sniper in a firefight. While others grab pieces at random, her hands move with calculated precision, each motion planned and purposeful. Her mind processes the equipment layout like a complex tactical diagram, identifying optimal assembly patterns that others miss in their rush. Sergeant Miller, 2 stations down, sneers as he notices her pause. "What's wrong, Lieutenant? Need a manual?" Chen doesn't respond, her focus absolute as her hands begin to move. The pile of equipment before her transforms with mechanical efficiency. Each piece finds its place with a speed that draws double takes from nearby candidates. Her fingers work with surgical precision, managing multiple assembly tasks simultaneously in a display of coordination that seems almost inhuman. "Time hack 60 seconds, Kane calls out, his expert eye catching mistakes others might miss. "Matthews, your comm setup is backward. Peters, check your medkit placement. Standard protocol, gentlemen and lady." The added pause draws a few chuckles, but Chen's rhythm doesn't break. Her mind catalogs every sound, every movement around her, building a real-time map of her competitor's progress. 3 stations down, a candidate curses as he drops his tactical radio. Behind her, someone struggles with tangled straps, Each mistake confirms her initial analysis. Speed without precision is failure in motion. 30 seconds. Sweat begins to bead on foreheads as the pressure mounts. Miller, clearly experienced, moves with confident efficiency, but his haste leads to small errors. A strap slightly misaligned, a pouch not fully secured. These details flash through Chen's awareness even as her own hands maintain their relentless pace. 10 seconds! Chen secures her final piece of equipment, each item precisely placed according to Special Operations Force protocols she had memorized weeks ago. A quick mental checklist confirms everything is exactly where it should be. She snaps to attention, her stance perfect, just as Kane calls time. The Chief Master Sergeant moves through the group with predatory focus, inspecting each candidate's setup. His experienced eyes catch every flaw, every deviation from standard protocol. Miller, radio pouch unsecured. Jackson, magazine placement non-standard. Martinez, where's your backup comm unit? When he reaches Chen, his inspection is even more thorough. The other candidates watch, clearly expecting, hoping to see her fail. Kane circles her twice, checking every strap, every placement, every detail of her assembly. Finally, he steps back. Well, looks like we have a winner. His voice carries a mix of surprise and something else, curiosity perhaps. Lieutenant Chen's setup is textbook perfect. Every piece of equipment placed exactly according to SOF protocols, optimized for both access and weight distribution. The yard falls silent. Miller's face darkens with barely contained rage. Other candidates shift uncomfortably, their assumptions visibly cracking. How? Someone mutters, not quite quietly enough. Chen's voice carries clearly across the morning air. Pattern recognition and sequence optimization. The standard SOF layout follows logical principles of tactical necessity and ergonomic efficiency. Once you understand the underlying patterns, assembly becomes a simple matter of parallel processing and spatial awareness. In other words, Kane translates, a hint of amusement in his voice. She saw the whole picture while you boys were all focused on the pieces. Tomorrow's tactical planning session is yours, Lieutenant. Use it wisely. Stone watches from the sidelines, his expression unreadable. Only a slight tightening of his jaw betrays his reaction to Chen's unexpected success. Clear your gear and form up, Kane barks. 5-mile ruck march, full combat load. Lieutenant Chen, since you seem to have such a perfect grasp of SOF protocols, you'll set the pace. Chen moves to the front of the formation, acutely aware of the hostile eyes boring into her back. As they begin their march, the weight of the ruck pressing down, she catches fragments of whispered conversations behind her. Lucky break. Won't last a week. Show her what real training's like. She adjusts her pace carefully, finding the sweet spot between challenging and sustainable. Her mind automatically calculates optimal stride length, factoring in terrain variables and energy conservation principles. The same analytical skills that let her predict Echo Team's movements now help her read the subtle changes in the ground beneath her feet. An hour later, as they return to the training yard, even the most skeptical candidates have noticed something odd. While many of them are breathing hard, Chen's pace has remained perfectly steady, her movement efficiency minimizing energy expenditure. She's not just surviving, she's thriving. Kane dismisses the group for breakfast, but holds Chen back. Interesting approach to the ruck march, Lieutenant. You weren't just counting steps, were you? No, Chief, I was calculating optimal force distribution and momentum conservation based on terrain patterns and group dynamics. The same principles that apply to tactical movement analysis work for personal performance optimization. Kane studies her for a long moment. Your brain might be your biggest advantage here, Lieutenant. But it could also be your downfall. Today was just a warm-up. Tomorrow we start testing your limits, all of them. The question is, what happens when your analytical skills aren't enough? When pure instinct and raw grit are all you have left? Chen meets his gaze steadily. Then I'll adapt, Chief. Like I always have. We'll see, Kane replies. Because right now, you've got about 30 very capable, very angry men who are going to do everything they can to break you. And after watching you today, They won't hold anything back. As Chen heads to the mess hall, she can feel the shift in the atmosphere. She hasn't just challenged their assumptions, she's threatened their pride. The real test isn't just surviving the training now, it's surviving them. The mess hall falls silent as Chen enters, her movements still fluid despite the punishing morning ruck march. The room is thick with tension and the smell of institutional coffee. 30 pairs of eyes track her as she collects her meal, a carefully measured portion of proteins and complex carbohydrates she's already calculated to optimize her performance. Over here, Lieutenant. The voice belongs to Captain James Rodriguez, one of the few candidates who hasn't shown outright hostility. He gestures to an empty seat at his table, where 3 other candidates sit. It's a peace offering, or perhaps a trap. Chen's mind races through the possibilities. Rodriguez, Army Rangers, decorated combat veteran, highest scores in preliminary tactical assessments. The others at his table: Walsh, Force Recon; Martinez, Delta Force Support; Thompson, Navy EOD. A diverse group, all with impressive records. She accepts the invitation, aware that her choice here could shape alliances or deepen divisions. "That was impressive this morning," Rodriguez says, his tone neutral. "Where'd you learn gear assembly like that?" Before Chen can answer, Miller's voice cuts across the mess hall. "She probably spent weeks memorizing the manual while the rest of us were doing real work." He approaches their table, flanked by 2 other candidates whose body language screams trouble. "Actually," Chen replies, her voice steady, "I developed my own optimization algorithm based on standard SOF protocols. Would you like me to explain the methodology, Sergeant?" Miller's face reddens, but Rodriguez cuts in before he can respond. "We've got bigger concerns than gear assembly. Word is, Kane's planning something special for this afternoon. Performance evaluation under extreme environmental stress is what I heard." The mess hall doors bang open and Kane strides in, his presence immediately commanding attention. "Time's up, candidates. Pool deck in 5 minutes. Let's see how well you all perform when you can't breathe." Chen notices several candidates tense at the word pool. Water exercises are notorious for breaking even strong candidates. As they file out, Rodriguez falls in step beside her. "Word of advice, Lieutenant? Whatever you do, don't be last in any evolution." Kane uses the last finisher as an example. It gets memorable. The Olympic-sized training pool gleams like polished obsidian under the late morning sun. Kane stands at its edge, accompanied by a team of safety officers and medical personnel, their presence a silent warning of what's to come. "Simple exercise," Kane announces, his voice carrying across the water. Full gear treading water. Last 5 candidates still floating after 30 minutes move on to the next phase. The rest? He smiles grimly. Get to do it again. Chen analyzes the challenge as they don equipment. Water resistance calculations, buoyancy factors, optimal energy conservation techniques. Her mind spins through variables while her hands automatically secure her gear. Water temperature's 58 degrees, she overhears one safety officer tell another. Perfect for inducing rapid fatigue and mental stress. In the pool, candidates. The shock of cold water hits like a physical blow. Around her, gasps and curses echo off the pool walls as 31 bodies hit the water. The weight of their gear tries to drag them under immediately. Chen adjusts her position, finding the optimal angle for water treading that balances energy expenditure with stability. Her mind maintains constant awareness of her surroundings. Rodriguez to her left working efficiently. Miller 3 meters away, already showing signs of overexertion. 2 candidates near the far wall struggling noticeably. 10 minutes, Kane calls out. Anyone who touches the wall or goes under is done. Lieutenant Chen, since you're so fond of patterns, why don't you explain to the group the pattern of hypothermia on set? In 58-degree water, Chen responds, her voice perfectly controlled despite the cold. Initial shock response occurs in the first 30 seconds. Muscle tension and hyperventilation follow within 2 minutes. Fine motor control deterioration begins at 10 minutes, with moderate hypothermia onset likely around 25 minutes in most subjects. Very good. Kane's smile is predatory. You have 15 minutes to experience it firsthand. The next quarter hour becomes a study in controlled suffering. 4 candidates drop out in the first 12 minutes, their bodies betraying them despite their will. Chen watches each failure, learning from their mistakes while battling her own body's increasing distress. Her analytical mind becomes both blessing and curse. She's acutely aware of every physiological change, declining core temperature, muscle fatigue patterns, degrading motor control. But she's also able to constantly adjust, making micro-modifications to her technique to compensate for each new limitation. 25 minutes in, only 7 candidates remain. The cold has become a living thing, trying to drag them under. Miller, despite his earlier bravado, shows signs of severe strain. Rodriguez maintains his position with grim determination. 2 minutes left, Kane announces. Lieutenant Chen, still analyzing patterns? Yes. Chief, she manages through chattering teeth. Pattern indicates. I'm still here. A ghost of respect crosses Kane's face. Time. Out of the pool, those still floating. The rest of you get warm, get dry, and be ready to do it again in 30 minutes. As Chen pulls herself out, her muscles screaming in protest, she counts the survivors, herself, Rodriguez, Thompson, and surprisingly, Miller, though he needs help standing. Kane approaches her as she begins stripping off her waterlogged gear. Interesting technique, Lieutenant. Most candidates try to fight the water. You worked with it instead. Water resistance follows predictable patterns, she explains, fighting to control her shivering. Like any other tactical challenge. Maybe, Kane concedes. But how long can you keep turning everything into an equation? Because trust me, Lieutenant, we're just getting started, and some variables can't be calculated. Chen meets his gaze, water dripping from her hair. Then I'll adapt the formula, Chief. That's what I do. We'll see, Kane replies, because this afternoon we're taking away your favorite tool, that analytical mind of yours. Sleep deprivation exercise starts at 1400. Let's find out who you are when that computer in your head starts to crash. The afternoon sun beats down mercilessly as the remaining candidates assemble for what Kane promises will be a lesson in cognitive deterioration. Chen's body still aches from the pool exercise, but her mind is already analyzing the new challenge before them. 20 metal poles stand in a precise grid pattern across the training yard, each bearing a different sequence of numbers and letters. At the base of each pole sits a locked box with a digital keypad. The setup triggers warning signals in Chen's tactical assessment. Welcome to your new home for the next 36 hours, Kane announces, pacing before the assembled group. The game is simple. Every 15 minutes, new codes will appear on these poles. Each code is a complex mathematical sequence. Solve the sequence, you get the box combination. Inside each box is a colored token. Get the wrong combination 3 times, you're out. He pauses, allowing the implications to sink in. You need 1 token of each color to continue in the program. Miss a sequence, you might miss the only token of that color. And just to keep things interesting, he gestures to a group of instructors rolling out physical training equipment. You'll be maintaining specific exercise rotations between code changes. Chen's mind immediately begins calculating probabilities and energy conservation strategies, but Kane isn't finished. One more thing, Lieutenant Chen, front and center. She steps forward, already anticipating what's coming. Given your unique capabilities, Kane continues, you'll be required to solve 2 sequences for each token, not 1. Can't make it too easy for our resident genius, can we? Several candidates smirk. Miller's face shows grim satisfaction. But Rodriguez catches her eye with a slight nod, a silent acknowledgement of the unfair advantage they're trying to negate. Begin. The yard erupts into activity as candidates rush to different poles, quickly copying down the first sequences. Chen forces herself to move methodically, choosing 2 poles with clear sightlines to others' positions. Her mind may be her greatest weapon, but situational awareness keeps you alive. The first sequences are relatively simple, Fibonacci variations mixed with hexadecimal conversions. Chen solves them in seconds, her fingers flying over the keypads. 2 green tokens join her collection as other candidates are still working through their first calculations. Exercise rotation, Kane barks. Push-ups, mountain climbers, burpees. Move! Hours blur together in a punishing cycle of mental and physical challenges. The sequences grow progressively more complex as fatigue sets in. Candidates start dropping out, some from exhaustion, others from failed combination attempts. The sun sets and rises again, but the exercises never stop. Around hour 20, Chen notices her perfect solve rate beginning to slip. The numbers on the polls seem to dance, rearranging themselves mockingly. A sequence that should be obvious takes 3 attempts to solve, nearly costing her a crucial blue token. Struggling, Lieutenant? Miller taunts as they rotate through another set of burpees. Not so easy when you can't think straight, is it? Chen ignores him, focusing on controlling her breathing, but he's right. Her greatest advantage is becoming unreliable. The analytical patterns that usually come so naturally now require intense concentration to grasp. Hour 25 brings a new level of hell. Kane introduces sound disruption, random noises, sudden shouts, music changing volume and tempo unpredictably. Chen watches 3 more candidates lose their slots after failing simple sequences, their sleep-deprived minds unable to focus through the chaos. Your brain's just meat, Lieutenant, Kane reminds her during a particularly brutal sequence of exercises. And meat gets tired. What are you going to do when the numbers stop making sense? The answer comes during hour 32. Staring at a poll displaying what appears to be a quantum physics equation, Chen realizes she can barely remember basic multiplication. Her usual rapid-fire calculations have slowed to a crawl. That's when something unexpected happens. Instead of seeing the sequence as numbers, she begins to see it as shapes, patterns of light and dark, rising and falling like the terrain maps she used to study in the ops center. Her conscious mind might be failing, but something deeper has taken over. Time's up on that sequence, Kane announces. Show your solutions. Chen inputs her combination without really understanding how she arrived at it. The box clicks open, revealing the final token she needs. Red. Kane studies her with newfound interest. Want to explain your solution process on that one, Lieutenant? I point. Can't, Chief, she admits, swaying slightly with exhaustion. The numbers stopped being numbers. They became terrain features like plotting an extraction route. I just followed the path. A rare smile crosses Kane's face. Ladies and gentlemen, you just witnessed something special. Lieutenant Chen just discovered that true operational excellence isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about adapting when your best tools fail you. When you can't think your way out, you have to feel your way through. He surveys the remaining candidates, only 8 still standing, including Chen, Rodriguez, and a surprisingly resilient Miller. Get some rest. You've got 2 hours before we start the real challenges. As Chen collapses onto her bunk, still fully clothed, her last conscious thought isn't a calculation or an analysis. It's a memory of her grandfather's voice. The strongest warriors know when to stop thinking and start feeling. For the first time since arriving at Fort Raider, she sleeps without running probabilities in her dreams. 2 hours of sleep feels like mere seconds when Kane's voice thunders through the barracks. On your feet, candidates. Time to separate the operators from the pretenders. Chen's body protests as she rises, muscles stiff from 36 hours of continuous exertion. Her analytical mind slowly reboots, cataloging data. 8 candidates remaining. Equipment likely need for night operations based on the time. Probability of complex tactical scenarios high, given Kane's previous pattern of escalation. The remaining candidates assemble outside, where they find Kane standing next to a case of what appear to be modified training weapons and unusual-looking tactical vests. Congratulations on surviving the warm-up, Kane announces, his voice carrying a note of anticipation. Now we find out if you can actually operate. These are next-generation combat simulation systems. The weapons have perfect weight and recoil simulation. The vests register hits with medical accuracy. You'll feel every shot, and the system knows exactly what kind of damage it would do. He gestures to a row of vehicles waiting in the darkness. You're being dropped at different points across our 20-square-mile training ground. Solo infiltration to start. Link up with other operators if you choose, but remember, there's no guarantee they'll watch your back. Miller sneers in Chen's direction. Some of us don't need help. We'll see about that, Kane replies. Because you're not just avoiding each other. We've got a full special operations team out there hunting you. Former instructors who love nothing more than teaching humility to overconfident candidates. They're using the same gear you are. He holds up a small object. Your objective is this. A data core containing critical intelligence. It's somewhere in the AO. Find it, protect it, and get it to the extraction point. Which, by the way, we won't reveal until the last possible moment. Chen studies the equipment as it's distributed. The weapon system's ergonomics suggest optimal engagement ranges and firing positions. The vest's sensor placement indicates likely target zones. Her mind begins mapping tactical possibilities before Kane's voice cuts through her calculations. And Lieutenant Chen? Try not to overthink it. Sometimes the best pattern is no pattern at all. Minutes later, Chen finds herself being dropped off in a densely wooded area, armed with only the training weapon, vest, and basic tactical gear. The night vision device provides clear visibility, but something feels off about the terrain. Too many good hiding spots. Too many perfect ambush positions. Her suspicions prove correct 20 minutes later when she detects movement ahead. Two figures moving with the practiced grace of experienced operators. She starts to calculate angles and probabilities, but then remembers the quantum sequence puzzle. Sometimes you have to feel the solution. Instead of running complex tactical analyses, she lets her instincts guide her. The terrain stops being a mathematical problem and becomes a living thing. She flows through the shadows like water finding its path, using micro-terrain features she feels rather than sees. The operators pass within meters of her position, never detecting her presence. As they move away, she catches fragments of their conversation. Got Martinez 10 minutes ago. Thompson walked right into the L-shaped ambush. What about the female candidate, the one Stone's so worked up about? No sign yet, but she'll slip up. They always do when they try to outthink the problem. Chen allows herself a small smile as she continues moving. Her new awareness picks up subtle signs of recent movement. Broken twigs, displaced leaves, marks that her analytical mind might have dismissed as statistically insignificant. These signs lead her to an unexpected sight. Rodriguez and Walsh crouched in a defensive position, covering each other's blind spots. They spot her at the same moment she sees them, weapons rising smoothly. Stand down, Rodriguez whispers. Lieutenant? Chen emerges carefully. Situation? 3 instructors working as a team to the north. Miller's trying to lone wolf it, almost got himself captured twice. We found signs of the data core's location, but it's too heavily guarded for a solo approach. Walsh nods. We've been watching the patrol patterns. There's a way in, but it needs at least 3 people moving in perfect coordination. Chen studies their position, their setup. These men have combat experience, real-world operational knowledge. Her analytical side says working alone maximizes control and minimizes variables. But something deeper, something she's just beginning to understand, tells her otherwise. What's your plan? Rodriguez sketches a quick diagram in the dirt. Walsh takes high ground here for overwatch. You and I move through these drainage channels. If we time it right, we can exploit the gaps in their coverage. But the timing has to be perfect. Chen's mind automatically starts calculating probabilities, but she forces herself to stop. Show me the route. Sometimes you have to feel the timing rather than calculate it. Rodriguez's eyebrows rise slightly, respect perhaps, or surprise at her shift in approach. Miller's still out there, he warns. If he spots us making a play for the objective, then we deal with that variable when it appears, Chen replies, checking her weapon. Right now, we focus on what we can control. Walsh grins. Copy that, ma'am. And Lieutenant, thanks for not overthinking this. As they move out to their positions, Chen realizes something has shifted. For the first time since arriving at Fort Raider, she's not being seen as the analytical outsider, the woman trying to prove something. She's being seen as an operator, someone who can adapt, someone who can be trusted when everything goes wrong. Kane watches through thermal imaging as the unlikely team begins their approach. Well, well, he mutters. Looks like she's finally learning to balance the processor with the warrior. Behind him, Stone's voice carries a note of concern. She's not supposed to be building alliances. This was meant to break her. Maybe, Kane replies, but the best operators know when to stand alone and when to stand together. Question is, what will she do when those alliances are tested? A sudden burst of simulation fire lights up the night, and the real test begins. Simulation rounds crack through the night air as Chen and Rodriguez move like shadows through the drainage channels. Above them, Walsh's occasional clicks through the radio confirm he's maintaining overwatch. The drainage system is a maze of concrete and steel, but Chen's mind automatically maps each turn, each intersection, building a three-dimensional model of their progress. Movement, you're 2 o'clock. Walsh's whisper crackles through their comms. 2 instructors, moving parallel to your position. Chen freezes, pressing against the cold concrete. Next to her, Rodriguez does the same. Their breath fogs in the cold night air as the footsteps approach above. One wrong move, one loose piece of equipment rattling, and they're compromised. The instructors pause directly overhead. Grid 7's clear, no sign of them. They're here somewhere. Kane's girl's too smart to stay in the open and Rodriguez has combat experience. Keep your eyes on the terrain features. Chen feels Rodriguez tense beside her at the mention of his name. The instructors know their backgrounds, their likely tactics. She forces herself to remain perfectly still, controlling her breathing as her father taught her during their meditation sessions. Finally, the footsteps move away. Rodriguez signals forward, but Chen holds up a hand. Her internal map suggests something's wrong. The instructor's movement pattern doesn't match standard search protocols. Either they're sloppy, unlikely given their experience, or... Walsh, she whispers into her radio. Check your 6. They're not searching. They're hurting. A burst of simulation fire confirms her analysis. Contact! Walsh's voice carries controlled urgency. They're pushing us toward... Wait. Multiple contacts. Northwest sector. Someone else is engaging the instructors. Chen and Rodriguez exchange looks. Miller, they say simultaneously. He's going to draw every instructor in the AO, Rodriguez mutters. Which means... The data core's location will be vulnerable, Chen finishes. She closes her eyes for a moment, visualizing the terrain, the patrol patterns, the most logical placement for a high-value target. There's a maintenance bunker 200 meters northeast. Elevated position, good fields of fire, multiple escape routes. Rodriguez studies her face in the dim light. That's where you'd put it? That's where I'd put it if I wanted to test not just our tactical abilities but our decision-making under pressure. She pauses, listening to the continuing firefight. Miller's creating a perfect diversion even if he doesn't know it. Unless he does, Rodriguez counters, could be leading us into another trap. Chen weighs the possibilities. Her analytical side screams for more data, more time to calculate probabilities, but the growing firefight means their window of opportunity is shrinking. Walsh, maintain overwatch on the northwest sector. We're moving to investigate the bunker. If Miller is playing us, I'd rather know now. They advance through the drainage system, emerging near the base of a small hill. The maintenance bunker squats at its peak, dark and seemingly unguarded. Too unguarded. Hold, Chen whispers, studying the approach. The terrain feels wrong. Too exposed, too perfect for a crossfire. She closes her eyes again, letting her other senses work. The slight breeze carries hints of movement. Equipment shifting, fabric against fabric. 3 o'clock behind the fallen tree, she breathes. 9 o'clock using the brush pile for cover. They're waiting for us to make the direct approach. Rodriguez nods appreciatively. How do you want to play it? Before Chen can answer, new gunfire erupts from their flank. Miller appears from the darkness, moving with surprising stealth for his size. He takes down one hidden instructor with well-placed shots, but the second opens fire, forcing him into cover. Lieutenant, Miller shouts, genuine urgency in his voice. Bunker's hot. Data core's in there, but they've got the whole place wired with simulation charges. One wrong move and the whole thing goes up. Chen's mind races. The mission parameters never mentioned explosives. This is exactly the kind of escalation Kane would introduce to test their adaptation abilities. But can they trust Miller? Why tell us? Rodriguez challenges. You've made it clear you work alone. Because I can't disarm the charges and secure the core alone, Miller admits through gritted teeth. And like it or not, the lieutenant here's got the best tactical mind in the program. So what's it gonna be? We work together or we all fail together? Another instructor emerges from cover, forcing them all to duck as simulation rounds snap overhead. They have seconds to decide. Chen makes her call. Rodriguez, move to that defilade position and provide covering fire. Miller, you're with me on the charges. Your demo experience plus my pattern recognition. Walsh, call out any new threats. We do this fast, we do this clean, and we do this together. To her surprise, Miller simply nods. Yes, ma'am. They move as one unit, each performing their role with precision. Rodriguez's covering fire pins down the remaining instructors while Chen and Miller advance on the bunker. At the door, Miller's expertise with demolitions proves invaluable as Chen quickly identifies the detonator patterns. Kane's watching, Miller mutters as they work. This isn't just about the mission, is it? Chen's hands move steadily over the simulation charges. It never was. He's testing our ability to overcome our prejudices. All of us. Yeah, well, Miller disarms another charge. Maybe some prejudices needed overcoming. Inside the bunker, they find the data core exactly where Chen predicted. But as they secure it, Walsh's urgent voice crackles through their comms. Multiple contacts converging on your position. They're coming from everywhere. Chen shares a look with her unlikely allies. Ready to show them what different kinds of soldiers can do together? Rodriguez chambers around. Miller checks his weapon. Walsh's scope glints in the darkness above. Lead the way, Lieutenant. The night erupts in chaos, but for the first time, they face it as one team. The night explodes into controlled chaos as instructors converge on the bunker from all directions. Chen's mind processes the battlefield in fragments of data and instinct. Muzzle flashes marking enemy positions, the steady rhythm of Walsh's covering fire from above. Rodriguez and Miller moving in perfect sync with her commands. Three-man team moving up the east slope. Walsh's voice crackles through comms. Chen's analytical side automatically calculates angles and firing solutions, but now she lets instinct guide the final decisions. Rodriguez suppressing fire on the east approach. Miller were falling back to position Bravo. Walsh, maintain overwatch and call priorities. They move like a well-oiled machine, each understanding their role without lengthy explanation. Miller, who hours ago would have bristled at taking orders from her, now responds instantly to her commands. The transformation would be remarkable if they had time to consider it. Lieutenant, they're trying to circle behind Walsh's position, Rodriguez calls out between bursts of fire. Standard pincer movement. Not standard, Chen corrects, her mind connecting patterns even as she returns fire at shadows moving through the trees. They're not trying to capture Walsh, her eyes widen. They're using him to fix our attention. Walsh, drop your position now. The warning comes just as two instructors emerge on Walsh's flank. He rolls away from his sniper perch seconds before simulation rounds tear through his former position. But the maneuver forces him into exposed terrain. Walsh is compromised, Chen announces, already moving. Miller, maintain security on the data core. Rodriguez, shift fire to the western approach. I'm getting our man. That's suicide, Lieutenant, Miller shouts. They'll cut you down before. Chen is already moving, her body flowing through microterrain she feels rather than sees. The analytical part of her brain calculates that the instructors will expect her to take the most direct route to Walsh. So she doesn't. Instead, she moves like water finding its path, using terrain features that don't show up on tactical maps. Her father's voice echoes in her memory. The best path isn't always the most obvious one. The instructors, focused on Walsh's exposed position, don't notice her approach until it's too late. Chen takes them both out with precision shots before they can adjust their fields of fire. Walsh, move to me! As Walsh scrambles to her position, new threats emerge. Multiple contacts, all directions. Rodriguez's voice carries controlled urgency. They're pressing hard. Chen gets Walsh to cover just as simulation rounds crack past them. Her mind races, processing terrain, angles, options. The analytical solution says they're trapped, but something deeper sees a possibility. They think we'll try to break out, she radios to her team. That's what every other candidate has done in this scenario, so we do the opposite. Rodriguez, Miller, fall back to the bunker. Full defensive positions. The bunker's a death trap, Miller argues. We'll be surrounded. Exactly. Chen's voice carries absolute certainty. Trust me. Moments later, all 4 candidates are inside the bunker, simulation rounds impacting the walls around them. The instructors close in, clearly expecting a desperate last stand. On my mark, Chen whispers. Simultaneous engagement. All directions. They think we're trapped, but they've given us what we need most. Predictable positions. The team readies their weapons. Chen closes her eyes for a moment, feeling the pattern of the enemy's movement. 3, 2, 1. Mark. They explode out of the bunker from all angles simultaneously, catching the instructors in their own crossfire. The element of surprise, combined with perfectly coordinated fields of fire, proves devastating. Within seconds, half the instructor team is marked as casualties by their training systems. Push the advantage, Chen commands. Rodriguez, left flank. Miller, right. Walsh, high cover. Move. The remaining instructors, thrown off by the unexpected aggression, fall back in disarray. One by one, they fall to the coordinated assault of Chen's team. Finally, silence falls over the battlefield. Kane's voice cuts through the night. Exercise complete. All instructors down. Candidates, secure your positions. As Chen's team maintains security, she hears slow clapping from the darkness. Kane emerges, followed by Colonel Stone, whose face shows poorly concealed shock. Well done, candidates, Kane announces. Especially you, Lieutenant. Care to explain your final strategy? The bunker wasn't a trap, sir, Chen responds, still scanning her sector. It was a focal point. By letting them surround us, we guaranteed their positions. Once we knew where they had to be. You turned their own tactics against them, Kane finishes. But that's not the most impressive part. You got 4 highly trained independent operators to function as a perfect unit, including one who started this exercise determined to prove you didn't belong here. Miller clears his throat. Lieutenant Chen proved something all right, that I was wrong. Stone steps forward, his voice tight. A commendable exercise, but hardly. Hardly what, Colonel? Kane challenges. Hardly standard? Hardly traditional? That's exactly the point. He turns to Chen and her team. The future of special operations isn't about finding people who fit our old models. It's about building teams that combine different kinds of excellence. Traditional strength, analytical thinking, combat experience, technical expertise. Together, they're unstoppable. He looks directly at Chen. Congratulations, Lieutenant. You didn't just complete the exercise. You proved why Project Hyperion matters. The first light of dawn breaks over the training ground as Chen stands with her team, their unlikely bond forged in the night's fire. But Stone's barely concealed hostility reminds her that some battles aren't won in a single engagement. The war for change is just beginning. The morning briefing room buzzes with tension as Chen and her team stand before a panel of senior officers. The night's success has shifted the dynamic, where once there were skeptical stares, now there are thoughtful expressions. All except Colonel Stone, whose face might as well be carved from granite. Let's review the mission parameters, Stone begins, his voice clipped. Lieutenant Chen, your team achieved the objective but used unorthodox methods. Methods that deviated significantly from standard SOF protocols. With respect, sir, Chen responds, her voice steady. SOF protocols emphasize mission accomplishment through adaptation and innovation. We adapted. You turned a straightforward extraction into a complex tactical gambit, Stone counters, spreading after-action photos across the table. Drew the instructors in instead of maintaining distance. Risked the entire team on a theoretical advantage. An advantage that worked, Colonel. Kane's voice carries from the back of the room as he steps forward. But more importantly, an advantage that no traditional tactical analysis would have predicted. That's exactly what Project Hyperion is about, expanding our understanding of what's possible. Dr. Rodriguez, seated among the observers, nods in agreement. Lieutenant Chen's performance demonstrates exactly what our research suggested. Under extreme stress, her neural processing actually adapted, finding new ways to combine analytical thinking with combat instincts. Stone's jaw tightens. And what happens when that processing fails? When the stress becomes too much? We're not talking about training scenarios anymore. Real lives will be at stake. If I may, sir. Miller steps forward, surprising everyone. Last night, Lieutenant Chen's processing didn't just keep us alive. It made us better. I've been through 3 previous selection attempts, trained with some of the best. Never seen anything like how she read that battlefield. Rodriguez pulls up data on the main screen, neural activity readings taken during the exercise. Look at these patterns. When conventional analysis became impossible due to stress and chaos, Lieutenant Chen's brain adapted, started processing tactical information through different neural pathways. She wasn't just thinking differently, she was perceiving differently. More importantly, Kane adds, she got 4 independent operators with different training backgrounds to function as a seamless unit. That's not just about neural processing, that's leadership. Stone stands abruptly. This is all very impressive, but it doesn't change the fundamental reality. The elite combat unit has standards, traditions, proven methodologies. We can't throw those away because one candidate showed some unusual capabilities. No one's suggesting throwing anything away, Colonel. Chen's voice remains respectful but carries newfound authority. We're suggesting evolution. The same enemy forces that drove you to create Project Hyperion are still out there, still adapting. Shouldn't we do the same? The room falls silent. Stone's face darkens, but before he can respond, another voice cuts through the tension. She's right. General Harrison steps into the room, causing everyone to snap to attention. At ease. I've been monitoring this program with great interest, Colonel Stone. Last night's exercise confirmed what Dr. Rodriguez's research suggested. We're entering a new era of special operations. He turns to Chen and her team. Your success wasn't just about completing the mission. It was about demonstrating a new kind of unit cohesion. Different capabilities, different approaches, working in harmony instead of competition. General, Stone interjects, the implications for established protocols are exactly what we need to consider. Harrison cuts him off. The enemy isn't playing by our established protocols, Colonel. They're combining new technologies with unconventional tactics. We need operators who can do the same. He approaches Chen's team. Which brings us to Phase 2 of your evaluation. Starting tomorrow, you'll begin specialized unit training. Not just physical and tactical challenges, but complex problem-solving under combat conditions. We need to understand how this new approach works in real-world scenarios. Sir, Rodriguez adds, my team has prepared a series of evaluation missions, each one designed to push the boundaries of conventional tactical thinking while maintaining core SOF principles. Stone's voice carries barely contained frustration. And when this experiment fails? When we've compromised our training standards for nothing? Then we learn from it, Harrison replies firmly. But Colonel, after watching last night's performance, I don't think failure is what you're really worried about. I think you're worried about success, about what it means for the future of special operations. He turns back to Chen and her team. Get some rest. Tomorrow we find out just how far this new approach can take us. As they file out of the briefing room, Chen catches fragments of conversation between Harrison and Stone. This isn't over, General. No, Colonel, it's just beginning. The question is, are you going to help shape the future or fight it? Rodriguez catches up with Chen in the hallway. How are you holding up? Processing, Chen replies with a slight smile. Stone isn't going to make this easy. He's not supposed to. This isn't just about proving you belong anymore, Lieutenant. It's about proving that special operations can evolve, that different kinds of excellence can work together. Chen nods, watching her team head toward the barracks, Miller and Rodriguez discussing tactical variations, Walsh already studying the next day's training outline. "Then we'd better make it count," she says, "because something tells me Stone isn't the only one watching to see if we fail." In her pocket, her phone vibrates with a message from David. "Heard about last night. Maybe I was wrong. Be careful. Word is Stone's got friends in high places." Chen squares her shoulders and heads for the barracks. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new tests, new attempts to prove she doesn't belong. But for the first time, she won't face them alone. Dawn brings new tension to Fort Raider as Chen's team assembles for their first specialized unit training. The morning fog clings to the ground like a tactical smokescreen, but something feels different. Extra security patrols, unfamiliar vehicles in the parking area, communications equipment being set up around the training grounds. "Something's not right," Rodriguez mutters as they gear up. "Too many brass for a standard training day." Chen nods, her mind already cataloging the anomalies. 3 unmarked SUVs with government plates, a satellite uplink being established near the command center. Stone engaged in intense conversation with 2 men in civilian suits. "They're evaluating us," she responds quietly. "Not just the training, everything. How we work together, how we process information, how we adapt." Miller checks his weapon, his voice low. "Word is some serious players are interested in Project Hyperion, Special Activities Division, Joint Special Operations Command, agencies that don't even have names." "Keep it tight today," Chen instructs her team. "They're looking for any excuse to shut this down." Kane approaches, his face more serious than usual. "Change of plans, candidates. Today's evolution comes directly from upstairs. Full combat load, live simulation rounds. You'll be briefed en route to the training area." They board a helicopter minutes later, the rotors drowning out conversation as they lift into the morning sky. Chen studies the briefing packet handed to them. A hostage rescue scenario, but with multiple complications. The target building is rigged with experimental electronic countermeasures. Standard communication and navigation systems will be unreliable. "They're testing your ability to adapt without your usual tools," Kane explains over the intercom. "Especially you, Lieutenant. No fancy tactical displays, no real-time data analysis, just your team and your instincts." Chen shares a look with her teammates. They've trained together for weeks now, learning to complement each other's strengths. Miller's raw combat experience, Rodriguez's tactical expertise, Walsh's precision and patience, her own unique way of processing battlefield information. The helicopter touches down in a remote training area Chen's never seen before. The target building rises before them, a massive concrete structure deliberately designed to confuse and disorient. "Multiple hostages, multiple hostiles," Kane briefs them. "The building's internal layout will shift during the operation. Electronic countermeasures will affect your equipment randomly. You have 30 minutes to plan, then the mission goes live." As they begin their planning session, Chen notices Stone arriving with the civilian observers. Their whispered conversations and constant note-taking make it clear. This isn't just a training exercise. It's an evaluation of everything Project Hyperion represents. "Standard breach and clear won't work," Miller points out, studying the building schematics. "Too many variables with those shifting layouts." Chen closes her eyes, letting her mind process the problem differently. Not as a tactical challenge, but as a dynamic system. Patterns within chaos. "We don't fight the changes," she says finally. "We use them." Her team leans in as she outlines her plan. It's unconventional, even by their standards. Instead of trying to maintain a fixed tactical formation, they'll move like water through the building, adapting to each change, using the shifting layout to confuse the opposition force. "It's risky," Rodriguez warns. "If our timing is off by even seconds." "Then we adjust," Chen responds. "We've trained for this. We know how each other thinks, how we move. Trust that." The mission begins with an assault team's worst nightmare: total communications blackout. The electronic countermeasures knock out their radios before they even enter the building. But Chen's team moves forward, each member reading subtle cues from the others, adapting to each new challenge. They encounter the first opposition force in a corridor that suddenly shifts, nearly separating the team. But instead of fighting the change, they flow with it. Miller and Walsh use the confusion to flank the enemy, while Rodriguez and Chen maintain pressure from the front. Through multiple floors and constantly changing layouts, they move like a single organism. When standard tactics fail, they create new ones on the fly. Chen's ability to process complex spatial information helps them anticipate layout changes. Miller's combat intuition warns of ambushes before they develop. They locate the hostages in a central chamber, but something feels wrong. Chen's enhanced perception picks up subtle details, slight inconsistencies in the hostages' behavior, odd patterns in the opposition force's movements. "It's a trap," she signals to her team using hand gestures they've developed. The real hostages are one floor down. Stone's voice booms through hidden speakers. "Mission failed. The hostages are right in front of you, Lieutenant. Are you really going to risk their lives on one of your theories?" Chen meets her team's eyes. They respond with slight nods, complete trust. They bypass the decoy hostages, fight their way down to the lower level, and find the real captives exactly where Chen predicted. The extraction is textbook perfect. As they emerge from the building, even the civilian observers are nodding in approval. But Stone's face is thunderous. "You directly disobeyed mission intel," he challenges Chen. "Risked the entire operation on a hunch." "Not a hunch, Colonel," she responds calmly. "Pattern recognition, the decoy hostages' micro-expressions, the opposition force's positioning, the building's power distribution, all pointed to the real location. We adapted to ground truth rather than assumptions." Kane steps forward before Stone can respond. "And that, gentlemen, is exactly what Project Hyperion is about. Not just following a playbook, but writing new ones when necessary." One of the civilian observers makes notes on a tablet. "Impressive, but the real test is still to come. How does your team feel about going operational, Lieutenant?" Before Chen can answer, alarms begin blaring across the base. An urgent message comes through Kane's radio. His face turns grave as he listens. "Looks like the real test just arrived early. We've got a situation. A real one." The briefing room crackles with tension as General Harrison lays out the situation. Satellite images show a research facility nestled in the mountains, partially obscured by tree cover and early morning mist. 2 hours ago, a private defense research lab was seized by an unknown force, Harrison explains, his voice grave. "They've taken hostages. Scientists working on classified military technology. Local authorities are compromised, and our nearest special operations team is 3 hours out." Chen studies the facility layout on the main screen, her mind already mapping approaches, identifying patterns in the attacker's positioning. But it's the next piece of information that snaps everything into focus. "The facility's main project?" Harrison continues. "Experimental neural enhancement technology, similar to what led us to Lieutenant Chen, if that research falls into the wrong hands." "How many hostiles?" Kane asks, already checking his gear. "Satellite thermal imaging suggests 15 to 20. Well-equipped, likely former military. They know what they're doing." Harrison turns to Chen and her team. "I know you're still in training, but you're also the closest qualified unit. Question is, are you ready?" Chen looks at her team. Miller's slight nod, Rodriguez's steady gaze, Walsh's quiet confidence. They've moved beyond words. She turns back to Harrison. "We're ready, sir." Stone steps forward. "General, this is insanity. They're not even fully certified. If we don't send them in, Harrison cuts him off. "We lose those scientists and that research. Sometimes, Colonel, we have to trust in change." 20 minutes later, their helicopter cuts through morning fog, approaching the facility from the least expected direction. Chen's mind processes multiple data streams, thermal imaging showing enemy positions, facility blueprints, approach vectors. But now she lets instinct guide how she uses that information. "Remember," she tells her team over the comms, "they're expecting traditional SOF tactics. We give them something different." They insert half a kilometer from the facility, using the terrain to mask their approach. Chen leads them through the forest like water finding its path, their movement patterns shifting constantly to avoid detection. When they encounter the first pair of guards, the takedown is silent and perfect. Miller and Rodriguez moving in perfect sync while Walsh provides overwatch and Chen reads the battlefield. Inside the facility, they encounter their first major obstacle. The hostiles have set up electronic countermeasures similar to their training scenario, but more sophisticated. Standard communications are useless. Just like this morning's exercise, Miller whispers, they're using our playbook against us. Chen's mind races through possibilities, then settles on an approach that would make Kane proud. Good. Let's use their assumptions against them. They split into pairs, using the facility's own security systems to create distractions. When the hostiles expect them to breach from one direction, they come from another. When standard tactics call for direct engagement, they find unexpected angles. Chen's ability to process complex spatial information lets them stay one step ahead of the enemy's responses. They locate the hostages in a secure lab, but the situation is worse than expected. The hostile force is attempting to download the research data while rigging the facility with explosives. Any direct assault would risk both the hostages and the vital research. Conventional approach says we wait for backup, Rodriguez notes. Play it safe. Chen studies the scenario, letting her mind process it both analytically and instinctively. When have we ever been conventional? Their assault comes from 4 directions simultaneously, each team member executing their role with perfect precision. Miller's combat experience, Rodriguez's tactical expertise, Walsh's precision shooting, and Chen's ability to read and react to changing situations, all working in harmony. The hostile force, expecting traditional SOF tactics, is completely unprepared for their approach. Chen's team moves like a single organism, adapting instantly to each new threat, communicating through subtle cues and shared instincts developed over weeks of intense training. In the final moment, as Chen disarms the last explosive while Miller and Rodriguez secure the hostages, she proves once and for all why Project Hyperion matters. Her enhanced processing capability lets her identify a hidden failsafe in the detonator, one that would have killed everyone if handled by standard EOD protocols. The mission ends with 0 casualties, the hostages safe, and the vital research secured. As they escort the scientists out of the facility, they find General Harrison waiting with Kane, Stone, and the civilian observers. Impressive work, one observer notes, reviewing the mission footage, particularly the unorthodox tactics and exceptional unit cohesion. Stone steps forward, and for the first time there's a hint of respect in his expression. Lieutenant Chen, your methods may be unconventional, but today, they saved lives. Sometimes tradition needs to evolve. That's what Project Hyperion was always about, Chen responds. Not replacing the old ways, but expanding what's possible. Different kinds of excellence, working together. Harrison nods approvingly. Which is why, effective immediately, your team is being certified as our first Hyperion unit, a new kind of special operations force combining enhanced cognitive capabilities with traditional combat excellence. Kane grins. Ready to show the world what different looks like, Lieutenant. Chen looks at her team, no longer just colleagues or even friends, but family forged in the fires of shared trials. Miller, who once doubted her, now stands ready to follow her anywhere. Rodriguez and Walsh, their unique skills perfectly complementing her own. No, Chief, she replies with a slight smile. We're ready to show them what excellence looks like, in all its forms. As they board the helicopter for their return flight, Chen reflects on how far they've come. From that first day when an analytical officer dared to challenge tradition, to now, a new kind of warrior, leading a new kind of team. The future of special operations wouldn't be about choosing between brain and brawn, between analysis and instinct. It would be about bringing them together, about recognizing that true strength comes in many forms. And somewhere above them, watching through powerful satellite imagery, Dr. Rodriguez smiles as she adds another successful data point to Project Hyperion's results. The experiment wasn't just a success, it was a revolution. The sun breaks through the morning fog as the helicopter lifts off, carrying a team that represents not just the future of special operations, but the future of human potential itself. Different. Stronger. Together. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.